Hello, all you Textual Deviants, and welcome to Season 3, Episode 10 of Texting. My name is Welcome to Prufrock in St. Petersburg.
And I'm Mark Will in Taipei.
In today's episode, we will be doing a deep dive, close read of The Love Song by J. Alfred Prufrock, the debut poem by modernist poet T.S. Eliot. And we're going to begin with a recitation done by two friends of the show, Germana reading the epigraph in Italian, followed by Tom reading the poem.
S'io credesse che mia risposta fosse a persona che mai tornasse al mondo, questa fiamma staria senza più scosse. Ma perciò che giammai di questo fondo non torno vivo alcun, si odo il vero, senza tema d'infamia ti rispondo.
Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky, like a patient etherized upon a table. Let us go through certain half-deserted streets, the muttering retreats of restless nights in one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent, to lead you to an overwhelming question. Oh, do not ask, what is it? Let us go and make our visit. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. The yellow fog that rubs its back upon the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes, licked its tongue into the corners of the evening, lingered upon the pools that stand in drains, let fall upon its back the soot that falls from chimneys, slipped by the terrace, made a sudden leap, and seeing that it was a soft October night, curled once about the house and fell asleep. And indeed there will be time for the yellow smoke that slides along the street, rubbing its back upon the window panes. There will be time to prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Time for you and time for me, and time yet for 100 indecisions, and for 100 visions and revisions before the taking of toast and tea. In the room the women come and go, talking of Michelangelo. And indeed there will be time to wonder, do I dare, and do I dare? Time to turn back and descend the stair, with a bald spot in the middle of my hair. They will say, how his hair is growing thin. My morning coat, my collar mounting firmly to the chin. My necktie rich and modest, but asserted by a simple pin. They will say, but how his arms and legs are thin. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time, for decisions and revisions which a minute will reverse. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. I know the voices dying with a dying fall beneath the music from a farther room, so how should I presume? And I have known the eyes already, known them all, the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I am formulated, sprawling on a pin, when I'm pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways, and how should I presume? And I have known the arms already, known them all, arms that are braceleted and white and bare, but in the lamplight downed with light brown hair. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress? Arms that lie along a table, or wrap about a shawl, and should I then presume? And how should I begin? Shall I say I have gone at dusk through narrow streets and watched the smoke that rises from the pipes of lonely men in shirt sleeves leaning out of windows? I should have been a ragged pair of claws, scuttling across the floors of silent seas. And the afternoon, the evening, sleep so peacefully, smoothed by long fingers, asleep, tired, or it malingers, stretched on the floor, here beside you and me. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? But though I have wept and fasted, wept and prayed, though I have seen my head, grown slightly bald, brought in upon a platter, I am no prophet, and here is no great matter. I have seen the moment of my greatness flicker, and I have seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. And would it have been worth it, after all, after the cups, the marmalade, the tea, among the porcelain, among some talk of you and me, would it have been worthwhile to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question, to say, I am Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all, I shall tell you all, if one, settling a pillow by her head, should say, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. And would it have been worth it, after all? Would it have been worthwhile, after the sunsets and the dooryards and the sprinkled streets, after the novels, after the teacups, after the skirts that trail along the floor, and this, and so much more? It is impossible to say just what I mean, but as if a magic lantern threw the nerves in patterns on a screen, would it have been worthwhile if one, settling a pillow or throwing off a shawl, and turning toward the window should say, that is not it at all, that is not what I meant at all. No, I am not Prince Hamlet, nor was meant to be. I'm an attendant lord, one that will do, to swallow progress, start a scene or two, advise the prince, no doubt an easy tool, deferential, glad to be of use, politic, cautious and meticulous, full of high sentence, but a bit obtuse, at times indeed almost ridiculous, almost at times the fool. I grow old, I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled. Shall I part my hair behind? Do I dare to eat a peach? I shall wear white flannel trousers and walk upon the beach. I've heard the mermaids singing, each to each. I do not think that they will sing to me. I've seen them riding seaward on the waves, combing the white hair of the waves blown back, when the wind blows the water white and black. We have lingered in the chambers of the sea, by seagulls wreathed with seaweed red and brown, till human voices wake us, and we drown.
Okay.
Okay, well read.
Very well read. Thank you, Tom. And maybe it's worth noting that Tom has requested this poem. If you'd like to hear his rationale, his inspiration, tune in to the end of the show in the audio version. And those of you watching on YouTube, I'm sure you can find it in the show notes, right, Mark?
For sure.
Okay, so if it's okay with you, I think we should do a close read of the poem now. We don't have to look at every line, but we can both comment on what stood out, what impressed us, what gave us pause, and so on. Yeah?
Yeah, let's go chronologically.
Okay. Can you go back even a little bit further then to the epigraph?
Yeah. So, yeah,
do we want to give any initial reactions to the poem? Or do you want to say anything?
Let's discuss them as we go, because there's so much.
Okay, can I just ask those?
I mean,
do you like the poem? I mean, I'd like to know if you like the poem.
It's a bit more complicated than that. So
yeah, it's a pretty reductive question. I agree.
I'd rather, discuss things as they come up. But if you've got general impressions, then go ahead and share them now.
Well, I would just say that what stands out for me is that sonically it's a very impressive poem. So I like Eliot's use of rhythm, rhyme, alliteration,
allusion.
Sure. I mean, I don't know if I like the illusion. So it's definitely present. But if I'm saying like what would make me come back to this poem later on, or what what I found enjoyable about the experience of reading this poem is mainly just impressive imagery and just a really lyrical, kind of roll off the tongue musical language, sonorous, and not
You
maybe
don't like the
as
allusion. What can you
not
explain
particularly.
that?
I don't like allusion because I don't want a poem to be like, I feel like it's such a mystery if you like pack it with allusions. Like it's like you have to have all these outside reference points to fully get it, and I think that's a bit like
Well, see,
annoying.
that's one of the defining features of modernism. You know, that's what
And
Eliot
particularly Eliot, yeah. I realized that.
well,
and
I was gonna say, and Joyce
and
are
Pound, right?
known for, and Pound, yes. Um, but anyway, what I thought it was interesting that you had never read this before. Is that right? Like
Right.
before? Yeah. How is that possible? I mean, this is like Norton Anthology, introductory survey course to British literature. This is like a canonical text, isn't it? Like, how did you take all those literary courses and not read this? You've read
I
other
think,
Eliot, right? The Wasteland, or
yeah, I've read bits of The Wasteland.
okay.
Um, I don't know. I mean, at the same time, like I asked a few people in my circle, and like they all kind of had this guilty admission that they weren't super familiar with T.S. Eliot or even this poem. So I don't think I'm alone. I mean, maybe it's not in the Arizona canon.
Well, maybe it's a generational thing. Like maybe he's now out of favor for reasons that we can discuss later. But I mean, we will discuss later. There are certain possible
Right, right.
explanations for that. But I mean, like the very first survey of British literature course I took, even at the community college, featured this, right? Like that was a definite part of the curriculum. Like there was no unit on modernism without this, and it
Right.
was in fact the Wasteland, because of its length, that was excerpted. You know, like we read excerpts of that. I read the entire thing myself because I'm such a good boy, but you know, Prufrock was read in its entirety because it's manageable. You know,
Right. And the Hollow
it's
Men,
not
that's
too
part of the
long and too
Wasteland?
difficult. No, that's a separate piece.
Ah,
But
okay.
all of that was included too. You know, did you ever have a copy of the Norton Anthology,
Yeah.
which was in 2 volumes? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like in volume 2, we had all the 20th century stuff. So it's organized by author, and so under the Eliot section there, if I remember correctly, there's all of Prufrock. There's uh I think excerpts from the Wasteland, and then the Hollow Men, and maybe some other shorter pieces. Sweeney Among the Nightingales, perhaps. Um,
Okay, well, let's say if
yeah,
there was this like predominant triptych, being this, the Hollow Men, and the Wasteland, like this is the one that was omitted from my reading list because I
okay.
definitely like touched on the others.
Interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so
So
looking at this epigraph, I mean,
yeah,
you you've just told us you're not a fan of the literary allusion. I am. I very much like this aspect of the modernist style, I guess you could say. Um, and of course, he's the epigraph is taken from Dante.
Which we should read
and
sometime.
We should probably. You mean
like
what?
We should do a show on it. I mean, yeah, I haven't read it, but
on the entire Divine Comedy. That's quite
how long is
quite
it?
an undertaking. It's very long, man. It's 3 volumes. You got Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. So
like, how many pages are we talking?
We couldn't. A lot, man.
Like 1,000?
It took me something like that. I got it on my shelf here somewhere. All 3 volumes. It's long. You can't do that in it would make the OJ episode look like a,
well, maybe an excerpt then.
Soundbite. Well, we're looking at an excerpt now, actually. So let's just explain what it says for those who may not understand the Italian. Here's a translation of the epigraph. It says, "If I but thought that my response were made to one perhaps returning to the world, this tongue of flame would cease to flicker. But since, up from these depths, no one has yet returned alive, if what I hear is true, I answer without fear of being shamed." So this is Dante in hell, and he's speaking with one of his countrymen who has been damned.
Guido da Montefeltro is the speaker, and speaking to Dante.
Yes.
Yeah.
Carry on.
No, that's it.
What else do you want to say about that? Well, I mean, okay. So he's saying the only reason he's speaking to him and confessing whatever it is he's confessing, whatever crime or sin he's committed, is because he thinks Dante will not return from the infernal region to the earth, right? Mm-hmm. So the only reason he's telling him this is because he thinks no one will hear it. So what does this mean in the context of the poem to you?
Yeah, I mean, how many of my ideas today will be original and how many will be borrowed? That's another issue.
It doesn't matter.
Sure. Yeah. So it suggests that what we're going to hear is private, is confessional,
shameful,
and
shameful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And isn't the same voice that Prufrock might bring in society, right? Might present.
Okay. Right. So it's a more authentic self, maybe more real,
or an inner voice,
unmasked.
Yeah, an inner. I think inner again is kind of important.
Okay. Someone also pointed out that it's kind of like with this medieval epigraph, there's kind of showing a split between the old and the new, the medieval and the modern as well, and they're like 2 aspects of the same split personality, maybe. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure I fully buy into that interpretation, but there's, I mean, we have to ask why this Italian epigraph is part of the poem. I mean, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, if this is supposed to be
maybe like Joyce, Eliot is just displaying his
erudition,
his knowledge, his erudition, right? I mean, it's like what Henry Miller said about Joyce. He's a pedagogical sadist. So maybe there's something
sounds like
to that.
Sounds like the speaker, the prison speaker.
Yeah, there's a certain ostentation, but erudition. That's a good
Well, another interesting
choice of word.
Contrast there is we'll get into this a little bit more soon, but if this is the poem that's like announcing modernism, then it's kind of ironic that it begins with this very canonical classic text, right? So it's, I mean, unless we can go on and define modernism and say that, yeah, this is actually completely critical and intrinsic to what modernism ends up being. But I'm just thinking, if we think of modernism as reflection of modernity, then it is kind of interesting that you've got this juxtaposition.
But that too is a quality of modernism, I would argue. This kind of I don't know, pastiche or collage method of composition. We see this in Pound too, as we'll discuss later. And
Yeah, that's why I want to make the distinction between like modernism and modernity, you know?
Okay, well, I was just going to say it's like polyphonic and multilingual. I mean, that, of course, that's Joyce too. There's just like a proliferation of voices, and it's like the dialogic imagination at play.
I don't know what a lot of that meant.
We're getting a bit too lit crit.
It's okay as long as you then break it down.
Well, as I say, proliferation of voices, you know, polyphony. There's like multiple perspectives presented in a kind of collage or pastiche manner.
The only other thing I could add is, I don't know if you've heard this interpretation, but because a lot of the classic references are presented in these fragments, I've heard it argued that it's supposed to represent like the deformed modern consciousness, which only possesses snippets of the past.
Exactly. Yeah, it's also fragmentary, and that's something we definitely get in the Wasteland.
But in a critical sense, right? Not in like a I'm saying it's not in like a sense of homage. Like you hear Jay-Z like might spit a few bars that are quoting Biggie as like a tribute. This I'm saying this could be more like a more cynical way of bringing in the past to show that it's not, we've kind of deformed the past. So that's like a different way to use it.
It's fragmentary. It's fragmentary. But yeah. I don't see that as a negative. I'm not like making a judgment, or if I am, I would say it's actually a positive. I like that collage aspect. I like it's almost, especially with like the Wasteland, it's almost like literary archaeology, you know, like he's trying to piece together some kind of new modern tradition from all the fragments of the past. In fact, there's a line in I think it's in the Wasteland, right? I'll have to look it up, but something like these fragments to shore up my something. I'll have to look for that and put it in the show notes. But yeah, literary archaeology. How do you like that? I'm proud of myself for coming up with that.
And so would you would dispute this other reading, right? That's saying that it's actually meant to be kind of mournful.
No, not like necessarily. It is mournful. Okay. It's a mournful. It's mourning the loss of, I don't know, what he would think of as Western tradition, maybe.
Right.
Like, yeah, and so
cultural decay.
Yeah, it's both homage and lamentation for that loss. So when we look at it this way, I like it more, you know. That probably that is more emphasized in The Wasteland than in Prufrock, but you can see it here in its origin. Like the genesis of all that is here, but I think it's more, that's more prevalent in The Wasteland. And this is a thing that I like, you know. It's even, you could even argue that it's
but you can also see how it's prohibitive, right? And how that could be frustrating and off-putting. Well, it's like you have to possess you have to possess all this outside knowledge. You can't just access it.
I like that. I mean, that's one of the things I love about Joyce. And I was just going to say, it's also like a precursor to the cut-up method of Burroughs, you know, like you just put everything in the cement mixer, as he once said, right? Like you just
as long
have
as the
all
poem
these
also
elements and you
stands
throw
by
them
itself,
together.
right? It should also...
well, not necessarily. Like the difficulty, the challenge of reading and interpreting is also part of the modernist aesthetic, I would say. And I always liked that. I kind of like literary puzzles in a way. I mean, and maybe that's just my own neurosis, but
No, that's fine. What I'm trying to say though is like something different, slightly different. Like I'm just saying, if you're reading this like in a university course, for example, where someone is, or even if you're using a website and it's highlighting to you all these different illusions that are being made, then that's one thing. But if you've just got a piece of paper and no Wi-Fi connection and you're alone, what about the risk that you'll just miss a lot?
Then you have to do the hard work, you know.
But how would you know would you know that there had even been an illusion? That's my point.
Keep reading.
You wouldn't know.
Keep reading. Yeah, well,
you wouldn't
reading.
know though.
I mean, the initial, you can sense it. You can feel that, okay, maybe I'm missing something. And maybe it doesn't occur to you until years later.
How would you know that Works and Days is a reference to Hesiod?
By knowing Works and Days. Maybe you haven't read it yet because you're an undergraduate or high school student. So when you revisit the poem years later as a more experienced reader and researcher, then your understanding of the poem will deepen. That's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. We want there to be more depth, and we want, every time we revisit it, we want to see something new in it and get more out of it. And so the more rich the text is, the more of these allusions that you hate so much, and come
on, I don't hate them, but I
references
think
to I know I'm being facetious, but the more of these let's say cultural or literary touchstones there are, the more rich the text is, and the more we can get out of it. And you can
it becomes an inside joke. You know, it's like,
what's
as
the difference?
A writer,
same thing. Yeah.
Well, you just have to recognize that if you're writing something, and let's putting yourself in the position of the writer, at every line you have to like weigh the costs and benefits of something, right? Like in terms of accessibility.
Exactly.
And do I want my work to be appreciated by just the Bloomsbury group and just academics, or do I want my work to be able to move the... Yeah, and
that's
I'm just
your
saying...
choice. And
well,
it's not,
I don't feel like...
As always, it's not either or. You can do both. You can appeal to a popular audience and have some depth and profundity, hopefully.
Well, that's why I said I think the poem also, if it's going to do that, it has to also stand by itself. That's my point.
Well, I'm not disputing that. Of course it should. Yeah. I mean, I guess it depends on your intention and your intended audience, right? Like if you want to just have a literary wank for the scholars and specialists, then okay, go ahead. But I don't think that's. I mean, maybe you could maybe say that to some extent that's what Eliot's project is. I would say with Joyce, there's more of the universal appeal, and that's why Joyce. I mean, as I've said before, The Wasteland is just a ripoff of Ulysses. So, in my opinion, like in my personal canon, Joyce is a superior artist to Eliot, like by far. And I think,
Okay, well, like coming back to the poem again, what
yeah,
I found refreshing was that, you know, when I heard the name T.S. Eliot, I felt that kind of shudder, but I ended up finding the poem fairly accessible. That's my main point, and it did stand for it by itself. And the illusions which you will help me unpack will only enhance that reading. But as I said, I didn't find
okay.
it especially prohibitive, using that word I used earlier. Okay,
It
so
was not the difficult read that you expected it to be.
exactly.
I was just gonna say there was some modernist poet that, when asked about the inaccessibility of his work, he said, "Let the reader learn to read." So here's a person who gives not a shit about accessibility, right? Like, I write what I write, you figure it out. With that attitude, you may not have an audience, but that's okay. You know, that was his choice. Anyway,
Fine.
I'm glad you wrapped that up because we should
Yeah.
carry on. So back to the English part of this poem, the introduction, which
Yeah.
of course is consists of these famous lines: "Let us go then, you and I, when the evening is spread out against the sky." So what do you want to say about that?
Well, just that the opening two lines, they almost seduce us into thinking that this may be a poem in the lyrical romantic tradition. We've got a rhyming couplet. We've got a nice nature scene, sunset, spreading out, the romance. We're going together. And so, really, we should pair this reading with the next line. But before we do that, I thought we could just spend a second on this question of the you, because a lot of critics have offered different interpretations of the you. I've got a quote here from Eliot talking about the three voices of poetry, which I'll briefly read. The first voice is the voice of the poet talking to himself or to nobody. The second is the voice of the poet addressing an audience, whether large or small. The third is the voice of the poet when he attempts to create a dramatic character speaking in verse, when he is saying not what he would say in his own person, but only what he can say within the limits of one imaginary character addressing another imaginary character. And I think it's interesting to make this an accompaniment to these first two lines because I can see all three of these voices in terms of the first person, the speaker, and the addressee. I mean, I'm inclined to favor the reading that the you here is us as the reader more than
That's
the
what
others.
I would think. Yeah.
Okay. But many people think it's someone who happens to be with him, some companion in that real-time moment. And others have said that this is like a schizophrenic almost discussion between two of his own voices.
All of those work for me.
Yeah.
And In fact, the more interpretations, the merrier.
Yeah, but we did both kind of admit that we see ourselves kind of as the you, right? We're being invited along.
Yeah, I mean maybe that's like the initial reaction we have, because when we read it, we feel like we are being addressed personally. But
a lot of love
as
poems in this context, we wouldn't be the lover, right? If it was a love poem, then we would assume it to be the speaker's object of affection.
Right.
So who are we to think
that's
that?
True.
But
well, I think I'm lovable.
And then we've got
I think it's perfectly legitimate.
You are universally beloved.
Exactly.
And then, of course, we could also tie it to the epigraph and suggest that it's if we're in hell,
the two characters in hell, yeah.
But okay, let's move on and go on.
Well, I already forgot what I wanted to say about that. Oh no, so yeah, you said we assume it's a lyric poem, perhaps because of the title, The Love Song of, but we quickly realize it's not because of the next line, I think is what you were going to say. But
exactly.
But can we not say that it is still a lyric poem, but a parody of such? It's still a lyric poem, but a new kind of lyric poem, which is a parody of the, perhaps you could say, the traditional medieval lyric, the lyric of the troubadours,
Mm-hmm. Or even a Shakespearean sonnet.
Right. All right. So there's that famous line. I'll let you read it.
Like a patient etherized upon a table.
Shocking.
Yes.
I don't feel it to be that shocking, but go ahead. Describe your shock.
Well, as this is the week of the infamous rap battle between Kendrick and Drake, it made me recall
which was won by Macklemore.
Yeah. But it immediately brought to mind for me Nas's song Ether. Have you heard that?
Ah, yes. Yeah, sure. You introduced me to it.
Okay, it was years ago, but yeah, it's but anyway, so yeah, it's just this very disjointed, and we've got a moment of kind of this prone body in a state of anestheticism, paralysis, and suddenly we're not really in that realm of, roaming through the daffodils anymore.
Yeah.
Right?
There's something serious. There's a hint of sickness or death, even, possibly. This image is pretty disturbing. It looks vaguely sexual. Looks like looks like someone trying to do a Bill Cosby. But
and it seems
you have to be watching the video to get that, people. So,
and it's almost like the shock
is
intended, I would say, right? It's not like expressing woe again in a traditional way. I mean, because it's not like older poems could deal with suffering. You could get Shelley talking about his melancholy solitude, that wouldn't be anything strange. But
Okay,
the fact that he's
but-
kind of like set us up for it and then twisted it, it's almost like,
But see, this kind of shocking imagery is not. It's not the first time we've had this in English verse. That's one thing I wanted to say.
okay,
It's really a revival of the style of the metaphysical poets like John Donne. So, and I think everyone agrees that Eliot was very much influenced by them. So,
can you elaborate a little bit?
well, you know Donne, right?
Only vaguely.
Death be not proud.
I know that line.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, there's just like interesting imagery, like the describing romantic attachment of two people. He uses the image of stiff twin compasses, which is not like a particularly romantic trope that
Mm-hmm.
May have been used by medieval poets. So startling, surprising imagery is something that has a precedent. That's all I want to say.
Okay.
It's not like the modernists were the first to do that in English verse. I mean, maybe that the example of the compasses is not the best example, but it's all I can come up with now. There's also a poem called "The Flea" by Donne. Oh, I did come up with another one, so congratulations to me. Yeah, so it's like the blood. He's trying to convince his lover to give it up, basically, right? He's saying, what's the big deal? Our blood has already mingled in this flea, right? The flea bit me and then it bit you. Our blood has already mingled there, so let's mingle our bodily fluids. That's kind of like, that's not a typical romantic image, is it? Maybe that's better than the compasses.
Okay, I think that's a really good point. And I guess I would just say that this is still something slightly different in the sense that that was being used as a form of like wooing someone, right? The example you just gave. So it's startling, but it's still kind of like consistent with this desire to seduce or to conquer, whereas this is just an expression of unease. So it doesn't have the same maybe like confidence.
But could we say that he's still attempting to woo the you, whoever that is, the reader, or
I mean, let's see, right?
other
Let's see how it
aspect of
goes.
the self, or
But
what was the other possibility? The companion?
well,
All right.
I think we'll soon recognize that Prufrock is such a kind of insecure and
Punk ass bitch.
What?
All right.
It's not quite what I was thinking.
Oh, okay. Well, I like this line. This is my slide.
Of course you do.
Just because restless nights in one night cheap hotels. So that, I mean, this suggests something seedy. Like, where are we going? Where is he leading us? Let us go through certain half-deserted streets. Are we in the red light district? The muttering retreats of restless nights and one-night cheap hotels and sawdust restaurants with oyster shells. I'm reading the text from my phone here, as people do now. Streets that follow like a tedious argument of insidious intent to lead you to an overwhelming question. And this phrase occurs more than once, right? What is the overwhelming question? Oh, do not ask what is it. Let us go and make our visit. Where are we going? To the whorehouse? What's the visit?
Yeah, I think that there's suggestions of that. I also read that oyster shells could be indicative of like an aphrodisiac, that oysters were seen as like, so you'd be like having your pregame Viagra snack, sucking up some oysters. I do think it's interesting though, because a lot of the poem seems to suggest that this guy is
oysters, the poor man's Viagra.
Yeah, or the rich man's Viagra. But no, but I mean, all I wanted to say is that it's interesting that in many ways Prufrock will prove to be almost like an impotent and incredibly, as I said before, insecure and self-doubting voice. And yet here he's talking about a whorehouse. It's almost like I'm surprised he'd even have the courage to visit one.
Is he though? Are we sure that's what it is? He's talking about, is that the visit?
Well, you suggested it, so.
Well, that's because I'm a dirty dog, but is it valid? I mean, immediately after that, we have the first instance of the refrain. In the room, the women come and go talking of Michelangelo. Like, what is this room? Is this the room of a whorehouse, or is it like
a salon?
A drawing room, a salon where these socialites congregate, and he sits there drinking his tea and eating cakes and ices, and feeling like
frazzled.
Feeling what?
Frazzled.
Right, and I was just gonna say like lacking in confidence and
tongue-tied
as I seem to be now. struggling to find the right word.
Okay, well then the question isn't. Then we'll leave that as a question, I guess. As far
well,
as
are there two places that, like, when he's in respectable society, he goes to these salons and sits there unable to say what he wants to say. He's very diffident. He lacks confidence. He can't make a move, as it were. So that's one visit. But then, in a way of dealing, his way of dealing with that frustration is to go to the one-night cheap hotels, right?
Yeah.
Like so are there multiple visits? Like or like, does he go to the whorehouse first, and then he's like, okay, let's go make our visit to the respectable salon, the drawing room where all of these prudish society women that talk about Michelangelo and are probably also sexually frustrated congregate.
Well, and interestingly also, we haven't really seen any hesitation yet from the speaker. I mean, as much as we're going to later get into how he's this reflection of the modern neurotic and, this person who's almost like a comic figure, here, so far, it's like, he's like, let's go, right? He's asking us to come with us. We're walking around. No hesitation yet. Okay, yeah, you have some questions in your mind, but let's forget that for now. So far, he's almost like been a man of action.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, should we
guzzling that oyster juice and then banging hose?
Come on, let's not. Let's keep going. Next slide, please. Get away from the Seoul Love Hotel.
Yeah.
Mirrors strategically placed. So we've already discussed this line a little bit. It is a refrain a nice little rhyme there between come and go and Michelangelo. Again, almost an element of playfulness with the amount of rhyme that we have here. And in the image for our viewers, you can see the David, and we can either discuss this now or later, but I do think it's worth noting the contrast between the impressive statuesque physique of Michelangelo and the physical descriptions that we will get of Prufrock later, with his thin arms and fantasies about being a scuttling crab. So in a way, we can see this as like the ideal that he's failed to be, and that gives him this kind of complex. Just something to think about.
And if you've seen pictures of Eliot, well,
yeah,
maybe that's understandable. Although I hear that some of those Bloomsbury ladies found him attractive, so good for him.
Yeah. Virginia Woolf included, right?
Well, Virginia Woolf preferred the company of females.
Okay. Well, he may have preferred the company of men, so we don't. That's another topic.
Eliot?
Yeah, I've read multiple accounts of potential homosexuality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
I mean, my recent post on his second marriage and the verse that was inspired by it tells a different story, but
yeah, well, maybe it's more bisexual.
In earlier days, maybe he was more inclined that way.
Yeah,
I don't know. As I say, I'm not the world's biggest Eliot stan.
So
anyway, tell us what this is.
Yes, thank you. We've got a lovely third stanza where we've got some really impressive extended metaphor, personification of the yellow fog as a cat, and lots of lovely verbs here. The yellow fog is rubbing the window panes. It's rubbing its muzzle on the window panes. It's licking the corners of the evening, and it's curling about the house. So, again, I just would say that this kind of is in contrast to this, like, gangly, impotent guy. I mean, I'm saying in terms of the ability to write something that's so sensual. If we're saying that the modernists are all about form as meaning, you would think that if what we're supposed to take of Prufrock is that he's incapable of, like, sensuality, well, it's interesting that there's a very, very sensual stanza here. And then there's an interesting question of what is the yellow fog. Some people have said that it's like the soot of industry, the sulfur from burning coal. I've even heard suggestions that it's like chlorine gas. But others have said it's the sun at sunset. I know you're a fan of multiple readings. But yeah, any reactions to the third stanza? Did you like this stanza?
I've always found the repetition of window panes strange, and I've always disliked it. It just seems
because
lazy.
The sound of those particular words.
Yeah, like what's the necessity of that?
I think
the yellow fog that rubs its back up
lazy.
On the window panes, the yellow smoke that rubs its muzzle on the window panes. Like, what? Why is that effective? What does that do for you?
First of all, I just recoil at the idea of like calling it lazy. I mean, this guy's like known for just being insane about revision and
visions and
torturing.
revisions.
Yeah, just like torturous. And he's like the opposite of
Okay, so
like a Kerouac
what's the
in terms of
what's the necessity of that? Like, what does that repetition add to it, to the overall effect?
well, I guess it just like forces you to really hone in on that window pane.
Focus on them window panes.
Exactly.
All right. What are the window panes of what?
And then
the
if
room.
you're seeing this cat, then you're like
Are
able
these-
to really see the cat touching this.
Are these the window panes of that room where the women come and go? Like as the women come and go and babble about cultural matters, he's focused on like the yellow fog outside, rubbing its back.
That's a nice idea. It's almost like this poetic
manner.
impulse to kind of get carried away. But do you find this like to be almost like a romantic stanza? Because of all this,
as I say, this is like my. Well, I didn't say it, but I implied it. It's like my least favorite part of the poem. I find that repetition off-putting, the window panes, and also I'm not a cat person. I'm more of a dog person. But as we know, old Possum was a cat person.
Apparently his book inspired Cats, the musical.
Of course it did. Of course it did.
I didn't know that.
And it made the second wife a very wealthy woman, as you can imagine. I always thought it was O-L apostrophe, but this here on the cover it's old. Anyway, I'll stick to my
Okay,
apostrophe.
so you're not won over by lines like licked its tongue into the corners of the evening. I think that's a great line.
Okay.
No?
I mean, it's fine. I just want someone to explain to me why window panes has to be
I get
repeated.
it. You're fixated on the window panes, but let's...
Well, tell me why it's necessary. Tell me how it's effective.
I told you the best thing is I like it because maybe it's the idea that it's like when something is reflected through a window, it happens twice, right? You're seeing you got the original plus what's going through. It could
but
be
you're
one
not
argument.
mad, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of repetition in those first two lines, right? Repetition of yellow, repetition of rub. So
yeah,
you could just argue again that maybe it's creating some kind of hypnotic, and that evening time where you're leaving the space of the rational, right? And you're going into the magical time of dusk.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I'm just trolling and playing devil's advocate, but that is, to me, this part is like the least interesting and effective. But I'm glad you like the yellow fog.
Yeah, and so far we've kind of got quite a bit of setting, almost, right? If we're seeing this poem for its narrative quality, so far we've got these deserted streets, we've got the restaurant, we've got the hotel, and now we've got a really nice description of the city, city at sunset. Yeah. So I'm saying the poem's going to go very different places, but so far we've kind of been more about describing the surroundings.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, should we move on?
Yeah. Okay.
So we're going to be now enjoying a lot of tattoos. I was surprised how many people seem to have tattoos of Eliot. There's really a lot. Even I went on the Reddit today for T.S. Eliot, and people were showing off their body poems. So yeah. So Indeed, there will be time. Again, so far, there's no real sense of regret, right? There's no regret yet. Unless I'm reading this wrong, we're still kind of like... we're still in a pretty safe emotional and mental place.
Oh my God, there's
there will
window
be
panes
time.
for the third time.
I gotta find the page as well. Okay.
Window panes
So-
for the third time. Did you see that?
Yes. So indeed, there will be time. This is repeated many times throughout the stanza.
Mm-hmm.
And as lover of illusions, I'm sure you will have known that this is a reference to Ecclesiastes, a time to be born and a time to die. And we get quite a different line than a time to be born and a time to die. We get there will be a time to murder and create, which almost felt as jarring as that initial ether.
Well, but there's also an echo of Andrew Marvell's "If We Had World Enough and Time," isn't there?
Yep. And there's
Yeah.
the Tuakoi mistress illusion, right? Is that...
Yeah, that's what I mean.
That's that, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
If we had world enough and time, this coyness lady were no crime. I think I'm quoting that correctly. So, but
that's like
Marvell,
demanding a kind of urgency.
Exactly. So it's what are we to make of that? Like, is he deceiving himself? There's really not time. There won't be time.
Yeah, that's what it seems. So
Yeah,
that's what it seems. So
he's deluding himself. I mean, that's his excuse for not making a move, for not, acting. He just tells himself, "Oh, I can wait. Just wait.
But we don't know that yet, right?
Yeah.
Like if we're just assuming that we're at that stage in the poem, so far, we've still got this like illusion of control.
Mm-hmm. Illusion, not allusion.
Yes.
Can we move?
Yeah, I wanted to mention something to you.
Oh,
that you can go. You can still go with this. It's fine. I'm coming after this anyway.
well, I love this line. I mean, even though as I say, I'm not the number one Eliot fan, I do appreciate a lot of his phrasing. And this is one of his great lines, I think. Prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet. So we talked about the authentic self and the unmasking, but then, like, if we're still thinking about that split personality, there's the society face, right? Like the face that you need to put on when you go meet the polite or the respectable ladies of polite society. That's one face, right? The face that you wear in the one night cheap hotels, that's different.
Yeah, and I think
mean, maybe there's a face that you prepare to go there as well, but this idea of personae, masks, I think it's very powerful. Prepare a face to meet the faces that you meet.
Yeah, and I just want to add that I think, from my experience, English high society can be one of the most oppressive social spaces that exist, in terms of an expectation that you keep things light.
Mm-hmm.
You don't express your duress, so it can be very oppressive. And
is that how you feel?
And I can only imagine
when you hang out with King Charles.
Yeah. So that may be what Eliot is
Or do you
Is
hang out with Prince Andrew?
expressing. So let me. Should we go on?
I don't know. I thought you would appreciate that joke more. I'm kind of disappointed.
No, I don't know. Yeah, I'm a teacher, so I don't want to go into.
That was an
those...
Epstein allusion, baby. All right.
Yes.
Here's the toast and tea.
Okay, so before the toast, the toast, I wanted to. You can keep the toast in the picture because it's quite a nice image.
Yeah.
But I was just thinking,
also very English, right?
Yeah, I do like a toast though. A bit of toast. So this line here. There will be time to murder and create, and time for all the works and days of hands that lift
Hesiod.
and drop a question. What?
Hesiod.
Ah, yeah, Hesiod. Thank you. Do you want to tease that out a little bit or no? I mean,
he's just.
Why
that's just the standard English translation of Hesiod's most famous work. So.
Right, but like why it's there? Is besides just to flex?
Ostentation of erudition. I've read Hesiod. Have you?
Is that it?
Well, I don't know. What's the? It's just a nice phrase, right? Time for all the works and days of hands that lift and drop a question on your plate. Plonk. What's the question? The overwhelming question. What is it?
Well, I just wanted
do not
to say
ask
that
what is it.
Mark, can I finish my thought here?
Sorry, man. I'm riffing. I'm getting in that Eliot flow.
Okay, well, I wanted to get into my Oscar Wilde flow for a second. Just say that it made me think of the calling card that the Marquess of Queensberry left.
No,
right? Because he would have left it kind of on a plate, maybe. I don't know.
Right.
Maybe that was a bit of a stretch, but that's what I thought of. So, okay,
I thought of
continue.
I thought of the head on the platter. You know.
That comes later,
Remember
right?
that? I know, but this is a foreshadowing of it with the plate.
Yeah.
The question could be the head of John the Baptist. Plonk.
Right.
Is that the question?
No.
Oh. All right. If you're sure. Time. A lot of time.
You sound like Trump. Time. Got a lot of time. What's the thing about the hurricane? About a lot of water?
Big water.
Do you know that line?
Big water.
All right. So I think this indecisions is pretty crucial, right? And it's also going to foreshadow the Hamlet reference.
And that too. This too is great phrasing. Time yet for 100 indecisions and for 100 visions and revisions. That's great. I mean, give him credit. Credit where credit is due.
But also this is like, again, an injection of kind of discomfort, right? And unease. Like, because I've commented on how there's like a surety so far, but suddenly, you know, he chose to say indecisions rather than decisions. We're kind of expecting decisions.
Yeah.
And people have commented on Eliot's use of anticlimax, and the before the taking of a toast and tea is highlighted as an example of bathos.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess you could say that it kind of adds like a levity to all this, doesn't it?
Yeah. And
it's
again,
almost like
that's
a Alice in Wonderland vibe.
Again, parody is perhaps another feature of modernism, certainly in Ulysses, and you could argue in The Wasteland as well. But I would say that, you know, Eliot's comedic sensibilities or talents are much less well developed than those of Joyce.
Let's appreciate the text.
Sorry, people. Sorry,
right.
Eliot stands.
Let's enjoy the poem and let's focus on the poem. So let's continue, yeah?
Back to the refrain. We're back in the room.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go around the mulberry bush.
Good point. Okay, let's continue.
The prickly pear. Yeah. And then
next
again,
slide.
Back to time. Oh, next slide. After the toast and tea. Another tattoo.
Okay. Yes. So, we haven't found out explicitly what this question is, but now it's being stated, at least it's being hinted at by just this idea of, indeed, there will be time to wonder, do I dare? And here's where many people think it's that the question is some type of proposal. It makes me think of like Jon Favreau in Swingers getting the guts to go and get a girl's number. But yeah, so it's just, and we could just think of dare being like the courage to do something, right? The courage to act, if we come back to Hamlet, versus the self-doubt. So yeah, we're looking at stanza 6 right now, and we start to see the frailties of the speaker emerge. He mentions his bald spot. He just needs to shave it off,
Exactly. Get over it, man. Wear a trilby.
He's trying to kind of compensate for maybe his physical imperfections with this coat and this collar and his rich but modest necktie. But he's also aware that at the same time, perhaps these women in the room are saying things like, how his hair is growing thin, but how his arms and legs are thin. So we're really feeling like the tension now.
Bitches.
The tension is definitely emerging now. This is like the first stanza, I think, where we're really getting, you could say, the type of anti-hero, if we want to call him that maybe would have surprised a reader. Is that fair to say?
Okay, I'll play along.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm deferring because I don't consider myself at all like an expert on modernism. But I assume that kind of stuff is what critics may have remarked upon, and they may have liked it or been put off by it. I remember one critic saying, the fact that these things occurred to the mind of Mr. Eliot is certainly of the very smallest importance to anyone, even to himself. They certainly have no relation to poetry. That was in a Times Literary Supplement critique in 1917.
I mean, that was the initial reaction among the respectable members of the literary establishment, I guess, which makes me, that kind of thing makes me like this more, because even though it might seem commonplace to us now or not that radical, at the time it was. And so good on him for shaking things up and making people uncomfortable and creating or promoting, since Pound was already doing similar things, promoting this new way of composing. But I would just say
I've taken
this.
Go on.
Yeah. Well, this stanza, I mean, the last 4 lines are fantastic. Do I dare disturb the universe? In a minute there is time for decisions and revisions, which a minute will reverse. Excellent phrasing.
And what I think is interesting is, like, I kind of, in isolation, this line, do I disturb the universe, can almost be like a new age mantra or something. Like, I think that doesn't match the tone is my point. Like, it's, yeah, taking it in isolation, it's like, oh, this like beautiful harmonious universe that exists, right, where we've got the yin and yang and we've got circle of life, and I don't want to disturb that. But actually I think it's more like, in the context of the poem, it's not this new age mantra at all. It's more like just this guy's insecurity.
Yeah.
No, but it's just funny because I feel like if we Googled, quotes by T.S. Eliot, someone would be like, yeah, do I disturb the universe? You know what I mean? And it would be like this kind of, this like hippie
why did this chick have that tattooed on her midriff? You have to wonder what does it mean to her?
Exactly. And I'm not trying to hate on her. Maybe she's hip with it, but it does show you how, if someone reads just for snippets, they're really gonna miss out, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And again, now we're no longer assuaged by this idea that there is time, right? Because a minute can reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
Should we continue?
Yes. Okay, there they are, those coffee spoons.
Yes. This is an interesting line. Maybe I'll read the preceding lines as well. For I have known them all already.
We should point out. Sorry, we should point out this is a Sorry, I dare disturb.
Go on.
I dare disturb your universe.
Exactly.
I mean, we should point out that this is also a tattoo. You've got, I have measured out my life with coffee spoons in cursive, and a fucking spoon beneath that. So someone had that tattooed on their body. Some Starbucks customer.
Barista.
Yeah, barista. I mean,
okay,
of all the things you could have imprinted on your body, like, okay, good choice.
So I want to come back to that. I just wanted to read the preceding lines. For I have known them all already, known them all, have known the evenings, mornings, afternoons. I have measured out my life with coffee spoons. So, I think it's good that you pointed out, like, with more cynicism, how this again could be read like a Hallmark card. But actually, like, I need you to kind of show me how this is. People argue that this is like a sad line. Yeah, that it's like supposed to kind of reflect. But for me, because I do have this quite a strong affection with my various coffee contraptions and my fresh coffee bags from hipster coffee shops, like I'm happy to measure my life in coffee spoons. So
well, and I measure my life with teacups. So
yes, I mean
tea bags. I'm a teabagger. I'm a teabagger.
Thank you. You're a carpet bagger. So
carpet muncher.
What? So anyway, I'm distracted now.
Yeah.
So
it's all that
I do see coffee.
Munching.
I'm saying I do see coffee as something like that can be easily eulogized. But do you want to explain how this is kind of a tragic line?
Both and, man. It's kind of,
Sure,
when you
but
think
let's
about it.
give the tragic impression.
Well, it's kind of pathetic, right? Like this is our life, just drinking endless cups of coffee or tea, or as Hamlet says, sleeping and feeding. That's our life. If man's life be nothing but to sleep and feed, then it's no better than a beast, something to that effect. But of course, here it's like we imagine him drinking that coffee in these drawing rooms with all of these prudish women talking of Michelangelo, maybe. And then
I will just push back a little bit on this idea of like
him being
prudes.
unable to. All right, well, okay, but hold on.
Let me explain why. Just because. Okay, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, just him being unable to make his move to, make his proposition. But okay, they're not prudes. Why?
Well, just having watched Tom and Viv last night, this film about
you did?
Eliot, and yeah, I watched the whole thing. Yeah,
send it to me. You have it?
Yeah, I just watched an online version. The quality is not great visually, but and it's kind of a dour film in general. It's pretty grim. It's just like kind of monotone, and but it was fairly well researched. It's based on a play, and it gives you some insight, I think, into the I think it was well acted. It's just kind of oppressive because all you do is kind of get this really this grim perspective of their relationship and the various trials and tribulations that they experience as a couple. But what I wanted to say is just that, Vivian was very animated, more sexually experienced than he was. So, he's the one who reportedly would be the one, again, who's be less inclined to being comfortable with his sexuality and stuff. So
I heard
I'm just
he
saying
wore
that. I
a
don't know.
truss. I heard he wore a truss at this time.
What is that again?
Like he had he had a hernia basically, and so he had to wear a contraption around his waist to like keep his junk together. I'm not describing that, with technical precision, but it's like, I mean, a truss is something that an old man with incontinence might wear, right? Or as I say, someone who's got a hernia. So that's obviously not a very
so it's like a lower body corset.
Yeah, and it's I mean, that's like the least sexy thing imaginable for a new bride. I presume. How should I presume?
Yeah, and again, my point is just being that I don't think I mean, I know like it's one of your tropes in your own work to kind of express your frustration about that type of prudity, and you've got what's the former land of Korea that you like to hark back to, where the women were, was it? Yeah, I know you've written about it before.
Right, I know what you're talking about. Koguryo.
Yeah. Anyway, I think he's the inhibited one, is my point. But okay, so we've got this kind of weariness, right, in this stanza. I have known them, known the different times. So I need you to help me out here a little bit too. So he's wrestling with this decision, right? The stanza ends with, how should I presume? And of course, presume in this context probably indicates like presume to act, to disturb the universe.
Yeah.
And what do we think about the connection between that hesitation and this idea that he's known everything? What do you
That
make
he's
of that?
known everything.
Well, like that's how
Known
the
them
stanza
all
starts, right?
already. Known them all, yeah. What are we talking about? What's the antecedent? Them? I have known them all already. What? Those decisions and revisions from the previous stanza,
or the type of women maybe that he wants to interact with. Because again, remember what the original title for this poem was, which is Prufrock and what was it? Prufrock and the women?
Among the women.
Prufrock among the women. So I think that would indicate, and of course the title itself being Love Song.
Yeah. I don't know.
I mean, it could be just like a cynicism that comes with like having been not necessarily rejected, but being either rejected or disappointed in like repeated attempts to find love.
Or I was just thinking like he's already played out in his mind all of these decisions and revisions. Maybe that's what he knows, right? He knows all the different ways it can go and none of them are good. How do you like that?
Yeah.
All right. Should we move on?
Okay.
Okay.
I've written, so how should I resume?
Yeah, why does that say resume? That should say
I don't
presume.
know. Is this your slide?
No.
Okay.
Let's fix that. It's pretty bad. Keep talking, man. We don't need this dead air.
Well, this is bordered with a quote from Henry IV. Presume not that I am the thing I was.
Mm-hmm.
This doesn't necessarily work super closely with this poem, but in the play which I recently read called The Cocktail Party by T.S. Eliot, which I didn't really like, to be honest, but it's like one of the presiding theories of love that the stranger or that the advisor gives to these struggling couples is that you should accept that your partner in your relationship is always a stranger, and like each moment is like a new moment, and you're kind of, yeah, you want to imagine that because you've got some kind of connected past and memory that should like reassure you in some way, but that it's actually just like a complete fiction. So it's kind of a bleak, my point is it's like a bleak perspective on love and the ability to connect. So I don't know, if we think about this Shakespeare quote, it's like, presume not that I am the thing I was. It's like, again, this like constant reinvention that we're always strangers even to ourselves, that we are not today who we were yesterday.
Yeah.
But so much of our interactions are like based on, but I thought about that and I just like didn't really buy it, because like if I think about even my relationship with you or my relationship with my wife, like, yeah, it's like the past is what we derive our present relationship on, and I don't think it's like an illusion. That's my point. I don't think that's like, I think the idea that a relationship isn't like, doesn't have depth or like isn't like doesn't contain the past, I don't really, I'm not convinced by that. If obviously it would help if you'd read the play, you'd be able to like respond more deeply, but Suffice it to say that Eliot seems
what
to
do
have
you mean?
a rather grim perspective.
What do you mean? Read
The
Henry
Cocktail Party?
IV?
You've read The Cocktail Party?
Oh, the Cocktail Party. Oh, I thought you were talking about Henry IV.
No.
Okay,
So,
no, I haven't.
Yeah. Again, I just think that the more I read about Eliot's biography, the more I just see him as like, yeah, just kind of like a sad guy who doesn't really like enjoy living in society that much. I mean, I don't connect with him as like his biography that well. But again, we can stick to the text and like admire the text. But yeah, we can continue. Unless you have something you want to say.
But I would just point out that in later life he seems to have found happiness, and at the same time, maybe the quality of his art declined, but he was happy. So maybe that's the price. Like the greatness, to the extent that he's great as an artist, that maybe that was due to his misery and unhappiness, and then once he became happy, he no longer had the need for his art.
100%. A lot of the stuff about the relationship, like the saving grace of this troubled relationship with Viv, is supposed to be that it produced the wasteland, and like the relationship was the wasteland.
And to some extent, I mean, she's probably been maligned unfairly, because I think to some extent there was a collaboration there. Like she advised him, she helped edit, she suggested phrases, and he respected her opinion to some extent. I don't know all the details of that, but there's probably a sensationalized image of her, perhaps due to comments made by Virginia Woolf and others, and we'll get into that later. But we should point out that there's probably more nuance to their relationship than one might expect.
And the other thing I would add is just, so you're talking about this kind of relief or quote unquote happiness that he gets later in life. One thing you could point to is, well, being in a more stable relationship, but he also develops this really close relationship with the Anglican Church, right? And he converts, and so that's another interesting aside.
Yeah, well, I think, I don't know, we may be getting off topic, but I think some have suggested maybe that was just an excuse for avoiding, it enabled him to avoid intimacy, not only with the first wife, but with any woman, right? Because he was scared of it. And his excuse was, I took a vow of celibacy as a Anglican, lay person, priest, or whatever he was.
Really? I didn't know about that at all.
Well,
so was he a celibate?
He did take a vow of celibacy at one time, and his Anglican priest mentor was like pushing him to get divorced. You really should get divorced. Like that. I read that yesterday.
To Vivian.
Yes. Yeah,
right,
then of course
different though. I mean,
yeah. Well, why? Because she's...
Well, the film seems to point out that, the relationship was just so dysfunctional, and she was, out of her mind, so that everyone around him, including her own brother, were, like, appealing to him in a way. Like, her brother was the one who got her institutionalized.
Committed. I read that she also became a fascist. Like, she would go out in public wearing a fascist, National Front uniform and saluting, and I don't know.
Yeah, I read that too. Anyway, there are a lot of her diaries and letters have been recently released, and while I think at times she shows like a certain lucidity and coherence that makes her a very sympathetic character. Other times I think she's just like absolutely bonkers, and it's hard. It becomes hard to kind of like justify her in terms of like saying that she should have stayed or she could have stayed with him. I mean, anyway, we said we're going to save that stuff for a little bit later, so let's stay with the poem.
Yeah, well, it's still, it's interesting background.
Yeah,
and
sure,
who doesn't love to talk about kamikaze women and the femme fatale? All right, where are we now?
Why
should I presume? Like I don't know, because
we're on this slide. Let's go.
We're already an hour and a half in.
But let's talk about the poem.
Yeah, we're talking about it.
Okay, let's talk about the poem.
Talk about them poetries.
So, prior to this line, which I've showed,
let's squeeze them balls.
Can we not make all this so sexual? Let's just stick to the text.
Why, Mr. Eliot? Do you have some hang-ups about your sexuality?
I'm English, all right?
Only half.
Some decorum is required.
No.
Look, I just want to say, like, I've seen the eternal footman hold my coat and snicker, and in short, I was afraid. Right. I've seen the moment of my greatness flicker. So now we're really seeing him as this older man. And rather than raging against the dying of the light, he's definitely whimpering.
Wait, you're already on that? You skipped a lot.
Should I?
If we're going chronologically, you forgot this stanza, and I have known the eyes already, known them all. The eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase, and when I am formulated, sprawling on a pen, when I am pinned and wriggling on the wall, then how should I begin to spit out all the butt ends of my days and ways? And how should I presume?
Okay. I think the issue is that the squeezing balls comes later on the next page. So yeah. I think the problem is that I jumped so much in terms of the slides. So yeah, we can just go to the text then.
Yeah. So before we squeeze the balls,
yes.
Spit out the butt ends. That's pretty good phrasing too. Interesting imagery. Isn't it?
And the eyes, I like the eyes that fix you in a formulated phrase. Just like somebody sees somebody and we reduce them to whatever easy label or reputation that person has, right? There goes blah, blah, blah. And it's like, that's like supposed to encompass an understanding of that person. So it's like a really dehumanizing way that I think we treat each other sometimes in like, especially maybe in those kind of like salon environments. So I like that line.
But they're all, none of us is seeing anyone else, right? Because we've all prepared faces to meet the faces that we meet. So it's all just a hall of, I won't say a hall of mirrors, but it's just a bunch of masks congregating. How about this repetition variation? Previously we had, I have known them all already, known them all. Now we have, and I have known the eyes already, known them all. Any comment about that? You're shuffling papers.
I think it's just, I like how much of the poem kind of calls to mind body parts, if we want to talk about fragments. So we have had lots of focus on hands earlier. Now we've got eyes, and those eyes of judgment. Later we'll get the feminine arms. We talked about his bald spot. So just
thin
if we
legs.
Talk about, so if we're talking about modernism, one of the tropes of modernism being individualism, of course the downside of individualism is like alienation, and it's like there's not a harmony with body and mind, or even body and other parts of your body. It's like instead we've got all these like fragments which are almost threatening when they don't exist in harmony with the rest.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like that?
Well, there's also, in modernism, you could say there's a renewed interest in the body. For example, each chapter in Ulysses is thematically related to a certain body part.
Interesting. I need to read Ulysses.
Yeah.
With assistance, not by myself.
Right. Well, I'm your man. Maybe we should read that together.
Sure. Would love to.
Okay. So, and then, yeah. So here we have 3 stanzas in a row beginning with, and I have known, right? And so next, I have known the arms already, known them all. Do we need to read all of this? What about
I like
these?
the phrase downed with light brown hair. It's kind of a nice description of the arm.
I like this couplet. Is it perfume from a dress that makes me so digress?
Yeah, I think it's a bit too cute.
That's what I like about it. I like cute things.
Okay.
That's why I watch all those short videos of Korean cheerleaders on YouTube. They just keep popping up. They're so cute the way they dance and shake their asses. I mean, it's cute.
So I think it's interesting in a way that
how can you just pass that over? You're just gonna
because what do you want me to say?
That?
What do you want me to say?
You should agree. You should agree or strongly disagree.
No, I don't agree. Okay, I strongly disagree.
It's not cute. What is it? Disgusting? Revolting?
It's
objectifying. Toxic. Oh, it's toxic. I see. All right. Well, it's a multi-million-dollar industry.
It's dehumanizing. It's dehumanizing.
What, cheerleading?
YouTube Shorts.
Oh, well, okay. There you go. So we're having a McLuhan-esque discussion of the medium. I'm with you there, but I'm just talking about cheerleading in general. Who could have imagined that we would be discussing cheerleading in the context of...
You were discussing it.
Of Prufrock.
I'm desperately trying to get away from it.
All right. Carry on, man. Get back to the squeezing of the balls.
Bro, I'm the one who's like having a drink here. This tea that you're drinking is
it's ayahuasca.
Well, I mean, what is the main what would you say is like the main tone that you're getting right now? Just like this kind of almost like a despondency, yeah?
I just find him pathetic, man. He's a sad sack. It's like, come on. Either make a move or go to the whorehouse or jerk off or do something, you know? Stop moaning and
I think that's
whining.
good. That's what I want you. That's what I want you to say here. Like
All
I want to hear that direct connection or like reaction that you're having to Prufrock. So like, but again, like I don't think I'm necessarily in that stage of my life now. Thankfully, I'm married and I've like got past a lot of that degree of angst. But I know it.
Oh, like, absolutely. Yeah, this is a young man's... I mean, I guess he's not. Like, he's like... Well,
he is young when he wrote this.
I know, but is the character of Prufrock young? Like, he says, I grow old. So he's more middle-aged, but he's got like arrested development. He never progressed beyond that awkward 20-something-year-old man's dilemma, which we've all experienced.
Right, but so does that mean that he's like devoid of charisma or sympathy? Because you seem to be quite like dismissive. which is your prerogative.
No, we can sympathize with him, but maybe the revulsion that I personally feel is revulsion for my former self, because I can remember my own awkwardness and hesitation and lack of confidence, and it makes
You
me
want to
cringe.
distance yourself from
Yeah,
it.
it makes me cringe. I feel shame and embarrassment, which is, that's part of what this poem is doing. It's highlighting that and forcing us to confront it, so that in that sense it's effective. But
do you think it's like potentially cathartic though for people who are having that experience? And perhaps that's what's really exciting about this poem.
yeah, it could be. But then why do you have all
the Hamlet indecision,
Mm-hmm.
I found cathartic.
Right.
Because I was like, yes, that is how I feel. Like, it's hard to make decisions, for example. It's hard to know what's right. It's hard to know which path to choose.
So all of these...
Again, I'm not in that state of mind now, but...
Yeah. All of these sexy girls
go on.
All of these sexy girls with the tattoos, do they realize that it's it's from a poem about a sexually frustrated incel, basically? Oh, I got it! Prufrock is the first incel.
I mean, maybe they're hipster girls, who are like English majors, and so they're down with it.
Okay.
Like, let's give them some credit. Okay, well, I mean, I think that's interesting. So let's continue. Shall I?
Yeah.
Maybe I got in the wrong order here, or maybe these next. I just remember the slides with the princess and the crab. Maybe we can come back to that.
All right, but we're looking at,
because I do see that.
Yeah.
Go ahead. We do see that couplet here, where you see, I should have been a pair of ragged claws scuttling across the floors of silent seas,
which is amazing. That is another great couplet. And again, I want to give him his due. Like, he often has fantastic phrases like that, and I think that's one of the best examples.
I like it as well. What stands out to you about?
It's just a great image. It's just a great image, It's like Robinson Jeffers wrote, "I should have been a worm in a wild apple than a son of man." It's just like disgust with the body and one's humanity. It's like, I'd rather be anything than what I am. And the image of the crab, like, it's such a wretched creature
bottom
in a
feeder.
way, huh?
A bottom feeder.
A bottom feeder, literally. So it's, yeah, like, it's just a great image, great phrasing, very effective. Give the man his due.
Okay. So then,
should we
the following
move
stanza,
move to that slide?
We're still not ready to squeeze balls.
Oh.
And we'll come back to the mermaid imagery later at the end of the poem, when we can then recall this crab.
Right. Let me just stop you there. Is that the first?
Sure.
Is that the first aquatic image that we have? We move to the submarine level, and as soon as I say this, I'm thinking about Bjork's comment on the Nordic soul being that submarine passion. Is this the first? Mm-hmm. Is this the first hint of that? Was there any other submarine imagery? And as I ask that, I'm wondering, is the submarine in some way equivalent to the infernal?
That's what I was going to say. The connection we have is the inferno, is hell in the beginning, in the epigraph.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, I guess, and oysters.
Right.
They're from the
Yes.
aquatic worlds.
Yeah. Fire and water, right? The infernal region and the aquatic or submarine domain. All right. Come on, man. Squeeze the balls.
All right, so before we squeeze balls, we're stretched out on the floor. And the afternoon, the evening sleeps so peacefully. Beside you and me, we've got the invocation of the you again. And I like this. Should I, after tea and cakes and ices, have the strength to force the moment to its crisis? I think that's like the perfect like food coma image, and that inertia and ennui that we feel. I know that I have that feeling every day around 2:30 p.m. after I eat lunch. So, but obviously this is maybe more about his twilight years. And we're really, I think, kind of sensing the narrative again as the stanza progresses. This old man looking back on his life, and again, kind of seeing it as a failure. He's not a prophet. Later, we'll hear that he's not Hamlet. The eternal footman snickered,
Yeah.
right, at him. So he just hasn't been able to stand up to life.
Mm-hmm. Did you notice the you
But he's
and
written a poem.
did you notice the you and me again?
Yeah, I think I just mentioned it. No, I just did. Yeah, I said he brings us back.
Oh, okay.
Here beside you
okay.
and me.
Yeah, that's what you meant. So what?
Yeah.
Any comment on that? Like
And you?
Well, I don't know. Like I don't know what to make of it. It's who. I guess the question is who is you, right? Who's being addressed? Is it the reader? Is it one of these women? Is it the split personality, like the other aspect of the self? All of the above, none of the above.
And the word malingers, I mean, in a way, we were ready to have a kind of luxurious post-food chill out, but the malingers kind of interrupts that.
Mm-hmm.
Because as stretched on the floor, you're kind of imagining that ancient Greek couch. You know, like you've just eaten and now you're just maybe rolled out in that torpor of digestion.
Torpor of digestion. I love it. No, it's good. That's good.
Okay. Thank you.
That's very good.
And it gets very dramatic here, right? Like just after this, well, I mean, in a way, he was like too full after this food to do anything, but then he's talking about weeping and fasting and weeping and praying. So the anguish is like real. The pain is real. But then it's the anticlimax again by saying, but I'm not a prophet. And so, like, I'm not really, like, my pain is not something that's, like, heroic, right?
Yeah. Good Lord, we've got, 5 more stanzas?
All right, let's not downplay. Like, people are sitting, like, next to their computer screens, like, hanging on every word, you know?
I know.
Like, make them feel like feel like it's worth it.
That's why we need to keep it snappy.
Okay, so the time that appeared to be endless now seems like it's absolutely dwindling, right? Eternal Footman is here, and we've got fear. Now we're starting with the stanza, would it have been worth it?
Mm-hmm.
This is quite an interesting stanza, yeah? It would have been worth it to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball, to roll it towards some overwhelming question. So, in short, it seems like he's asking, would it have been worth it to act, right? To put aside the hesitation.
Yeah.
But the risk is that she may have come back with, that is not what I meant at all. That is not it at all. I mean, I took that to say, like, yeah, it's like somebody who confesses everything and thinks that the other person feels the same, and then you realize you've been just misreading the other person, and you feel like a fool.
That's always how I read this, and the overwhelming question would be something along the lines of, "Can I
be my girl?"
Yeah, well, I was thinking of something more obscene, but something akin to what he did with the tall girl in the later amatory verse.
Okay.
Namely,
interesting line to have bitten off the matter with a smile.
He seems to have had an oral fixation, so something along the lines of may I tickle your nipple with my tongue, something of that sort. And then she says, that is not what I meant at all. How dare you?
Yeah. What do you think about the lines to have bitten off the matter with a smile, to have squeezed the universe into a ball?
Well, that ball is that titty ball.
What is the matter? The matter being like the stress in a way, right? Because I thought of matter as like substance, but maybe it's more like
the issue,
stress.
The issue.
So like to grin and bear it kind of thing.
No, to deal with the issue at hand, namely the unspoken feeling of attraction,
like the anxiety.
Wow, we're really talking past each other. I'm thinking of like the feeling of attraction that he wonders whether it's reciprocated, and then he fears that it's not, so he keeps his mouth shut.
Yeah, but I mean, he's saying, would it have been worth it to, like, should I have tried? No?
Yeah,
you don't
right.
You don't see that? Should I have?
Yeah.
So I'm saying to have bitten off the matter could be like to have bitten off, to like have fought, to like bitten off the worry.
Yes.
And like with it, grin and bear it. Yeah. So, and what about the Lazarus stuff?
Well, Lazarus. Should we move to that slide? Let's look at a picture of him. There he is. I'm Lazarus, come from the dead, come back to tell you all. I should tell you all.
Yeah, I mean, I know Lazarus, obviously, but yeah, go on.
Well, we've got an image of Jesus raising him from the dead. I mean, he's resurrected, right? And especially in Lawrence, the resurrection is always associated with the erection. So it's like, that's how I read it. Why? Right? Think about it. Like it's what Joyce called. What was his term for it? Oh shit! Now I forget. But tumescence, detumescence. Yeah. Right? Up like a rocket, down like a stick. But every time it's resurrected, you're coming back from the dead. Every new erection is like a resurrection. It's a return from the dead.
Well, I was thinking from the epigraph, he's dead, right? I don't know if there's something there.
Yes.
But
yes, good point. And remember it's like no man comes back from that. That's the assumption of
Right.
Dante's interlocutor, but then Lazarus is a contradiction.
Refutes that, right?
Lazarus refutes that mistaken notion. You
I've
can
written down in my
return
notes
from the
that
dead.
I've written in my notes that this is like where the Andrew Marvel to his coy mistress is like really the illusion is clear, but I don't see it. Maybe you can. Is it? I've written it next to the line to have squeezed the universe into a ball.
Yes,
yeah,
man. In the words of Marvin Gaye, let's get it on. That's what this is about.
But what is the idea of like squeezing the universe into a ball?
Squeeze them balls.
What is? Yes, okay, but what does it mean?
It's just take the world into your hands, or
like take the initiative.
Take
it's
the
opposite.
initiative.
Do I dare disturb the universe?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, shall we?
I mean, if we're literal about it, like how do you squeeze the universe into a ball? You grab, right? You grasp. You
right.
do something. It's like Zorba the Greek said, God gave us hands for taking, right? Like why do we have hands? So we can take things. We grab, grab that titty ball.
Yeah.
Grab that ass, which is also globular. Is that a word? It's like a globe.
So you're saying Trump was right to say that I don't even ask.
How dare he presume? Well, I mean, yeah. As vulgar as he is, he certainly, yeah. Although, according to his partners, he's probably like just as limp dick a performer as Prufrock and Eliot too, I would imagine. All right.
Next slide.
Yes. All right, here's the Proustian connection.
Yes.
Proust.
Is it intentional? Do you think?
Probably.
Or is that just...
I read that Eliot, that is, read Proust in English but not in French, so he felt like he didn't have a good understanding of Proust, but then it was like false modesty, because when he started talking about Proust, he knew the text very well, right? But his excuse was, well, I only read it in English, so who am I to comment on it? But like, actually, he was quite familiar with Proust, so
I mean, because the date for Swan's Way that I have here is 1913.
Yeah.
And then if this was written 1915,
right? So it would have been out.
He didn't have much time though. But that's a quick.
But he probably would have been aware of it.
Okay. Do we want to comment on this stanza?
It's just, famously in Swan's Way, the narrator mentions the magic lantern that he had as a kid, and so when we see this line in Eliot, I think we both had the same thought. Like you said, do you notice the Proustian allusion? And you didn't say what it was, but of course I had the same thought as you, the magic lantern. But as if a magic lantern... And this
image that we've got,
mm-hmm.
It seems like this image is actually what the magic lantern was like a little bit. Like, and I didn't picture it like that when I read Swan's Way. I pictured it as almost like something that was like rotating with like one kind of colorful image.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like a primitive disco ball or something. But so this is interesting that this seems to indicate that it's more like a motion picture type projector.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe that's not.
I think it does. I think it might revolve like it's almost like a slideshow, I want to say, but I don't have a clear understanding of how it works either. In other words, I think it has more than one image, right? Like it's a series of images, almost like you say, like a projector. All right.
This stanza also has the line.
Mm-hmm.
It just says, "It is impossible to say just what I mean." I wonder if that, for that time, also would have been quite like a surprising and almost like revolutionary line, because it's again so self-referential, so like stream of consciousness. If we think about the beats later, you know, like they would have been like that kind of confessional, or yeah, I mean, it's just it has none of the like. You wonder why someone would put that in a poem, right? If you were coming from a time before that, you'd be like, well, why did you write that then? And he would say, no, because I'm trying to expose the inner workings of my mind or something.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's convincing, but okay. All right. So now we've got the section about Hamlet. Do we have a slide for that, or are we just going to talk about it? What's our next slide?
I think we do. Yeah. It's a meme which misquotes it, but yeah. Misquotes the poem.
Yeah, well, with one word is missing. Yeah, so no, I'm not Prince Hamlet, nor was I meant to be. Nor was meant to be, sorry. And people seem to think that he's placing himself in the role of Polonius rather than Hamlet as the attendant lord.
Yes.
So, what do you think of this? Is this like supposed to be some kind of? I mean, in a sense, it's like humility, self-deprecation.
Well, we kind of, with those revisions, decisions and revisions, we think about Hamlet, right? Or at least I do. But then he
the indecisions,
yeah, indecisions. We think about Hamlet, but then he disavows that, right? He's like,
right.
No, that's if anything, I'm Polonius, not Hamlet.
Yeah, and I think that's,
in fact,
again, it's very conversational.
Mm-hmm.
Modern. It's very modern.
Yeah.
Okay. Go on.
Well, in fact, the fool, which is what which is how Polonius is depicted in the play, and I think Hamlet actually calls him an old fool or something like that. But no,
like, whereas like I would see you as like embracing that.
Yeah,
you know, like
sure.
Whatever you hear, he hasn't got to the point where he's ready to celebrate himself.
In fact,
Whitmanian.
This is how much I embrace it. The fool is the inspiration for the cover of my book, Earnest Games. There it is. So, yeah, I mean, the fool in the tarot deck has multiple meanings. It's not just stupid person.
And I think it's like and I think this is what I kind of find off-putting about Eliot. You know, it's just like this kind of this heaviness that I sense with his whole character.
Yeah, I mean,
that's not something I blame him for, but
yeah, like, do you think
who he is?
Do you think he'd be a fun guy to hang out with? I mean, like,
yeah, exactly. So there's just like and just even I was reading something today, like most of life, or we're always like running away from our true selves, and like poetry can help us like find our real self. Okay, part of me, I understand, but just this idea that like the real self is like, I don't know, is this like heavy space of complexity. You know, it's just, yeah, it's like it's really heavy. It's it's choosing an approach to life that's, yeah, go on.
He famously said of, Wordsworth's formula, poetry is the spontaneous
emotion, right?
the spontaneous overflow of powerful feelings. Eliot said
Right.
no, it's not. It's the escaping from those.
Right, it's the opposite.
Yeah, it's escaping from those powerful feelings. So that, you know, it's a very anti-romantic point of view, I guess you could say. Now this is the Eliot of the period that we're discussing, not the later Eliot, which was, as I say, and people should check out my Substack post on his late amatory verse. Like, it's a more playful side to Eliot. And, you know, maybe that's because he found sexual satisfaction with his second wife. And so he
But that's interesting because, well, I want to say two things about that. One is, like, maybe we're being a bit harsh considering he just did try to, like, say that he's not some grand Hamlet figure. So I mean, we're being a bit harsh, I think, to then say, "Oh, dude, like, stop taking yourself so seriously." And second thing, though, like, to challenge your idea that later he became, like, lighter. But I heard that, I don't know much about this, like, later work that he wrote, but it was very religious, right? The four quartets.
Oh yeah.
That doesn't sound like some very, like, some particularly, you know, light word reading, right?
No,
it's like,
but then after that, he wrote those tall girl poems, and he's talking about
okay.
his, and he says, this lyric is to me worth 40 quartets. So he's like undermining his own pretentiousness and seriousness.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yep.
By the way, do you know that Sting named his child Eliot, Eliot, and Eliot is non-binary and was recently featured in the Netflix series Ripley.
Interesting.
But I think with that spelling,
but named after T.S. Eliot.
Eliot. I mean, what else would it be? He's probably, I can imagine Sting reading the four quartets with great dramatic flair and saying, oh, yes, profound. All right.
Although he didn't have any issues with impotency.
Apparently not.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. He's like the Kama Sutra master, they say. Banging old Trudy for 3-4 hours. That's probably how...
My dad's going to love this podcast.
That's probably how Eliot was conceived. One of those marathon sessions. Hey, I'm all for it. All right, so, here's the peach. Do I dare to eat a peach? That seems pretty sexual, too. There's actually a line in a David Lynch movie, Wild at Heart. It's like, I think the Laura Dern character asks the Nicolas Cage character, or what he's talking about, like an ex-girlfriend, and then there's like a close-up of the ex-girlfriend and a flashback with her legs open. She says, "You want to eat this peach?" So
that's interesting because the peach emoji tends to be, for the butt. Or like that's how I see it used. But
eat that ass.
So Father, I'm sorry. Okay.
I'm corrupting your son.
Exactly. So yeah, I guess I just think that the peach does represent that kind of like sensuality, right? And he's like saying, "Do I dare? Do I dare enter that world?" And I've got this short phrase from D.H. Lawrence, which again seems to carry that sensuality. Why so velvety? Why so voluptuous, heavy? Why hanging with such inordinate weight? Why so indented? And then if we can go to the next slide, because it just reminds me of this famous scene in Women in Love.
Wait, read the
especially
rest.
In the movie. It's like,
read the rest of that. Why the
okay,
groove?
Yeah, go ahead.
Why the groove? Why the lovely bivalve roundnesses? Bivalve roundnesses? That sounds like breastises. Why the ripple down the sphere? Why the suggestion of incision or insertion? I mean, very sexual.
Go to the next slide, because it's going to just
build on this. Are you going to deny that? It's obvious.
No, not
right?
at all. That's why I've included it.
Yeah.
That's why I've included it. But go to the next slide, because we're gonna.
What's the ludicrous?
You're usually Mr. 2 hours. We're up.
What's the ludicrous line? Eating fresh fruit. What's your fantasy?
Yeah,
you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
All right, figs.
Well, do you remember this scene from Women in Love?
No.
It's like a really celebrated scene in the film. It's like, I think because it's like
I've
imitation
not seen
of oral
it. I've
sex.
Not seen it.
Okay, well, it's just, there's a lot of
both
homoeroticism and just... The proper way to eat a fig in society is to split it in 4, holding it by the stump, and open it so that it is a glittering, rosy, moist, honeyed, heavy-petaled, 4-petaled flower. Then you throw away the skin, which is just like a 4-sepaled calyx, and you have taken off the blossom with your lips. But the vulgar way is just to put your mouth to the crack and take out the flesh in one bite. Every fruit has its secret. The fig is a very secretive fruit. As you see it standing, growing, you feel at once it is symbolic. Yeah, just some, again, intertextuality, as you like to call it.
It's so much more, I mean, just that contrast, just the contrast of styles, Eliot versus Lawrence. I mean, there's so much more life and dynamism in Lawrence, It's like...
He has some phrase for that. I can't remember if it's called like the blood or something. There's like this catchphrase that Lawrence likes to use that represents that. But yeah. But again, yeah, this is Eliot, right?
Yeah.
So
well,
we can have
who is
a Prufrock character too.
Yeah, I know, but like if we're considering masculine role models, like who would you recommend to your son?
Both and.
All right, good answer. It was a trick question.
Yeah.
Both and expose them to both.
There's something to be said for...
Yeah.
There's something to be said for this type of character, and yeah, as I said, I'm not ready to like disown my previous self, and as I said, I think a lot of English people have this type of personality. I see it in a lot of English men.
Yeah, but don't forget, Eliot is an American by birth.
Yeah, sure. But I just mean, there's a charm to that, and...
Yeah, which is interesting because Lawrence, though a Brit by birth, is actually more American in his sensibilities, right? Like he famously wrote the book Classic Studies in American Literature. I think that's the title of it. Like he was,
and he spent a lot of time in America,
New Mexico,
New Mexico, and
Mexico as well. But like it's like they switched domains, switched roles.
Sure. Yeah, that is interesting.
As I'm thinking about Lawrence, it was reading the poetry of D.H. Lawrence that was one of the important inspirations for Dylan Thomas. And as we were preparing for this episode, I was just thinking about how much more I prefer Dylan Thomas to T.S. Eliot as well. Maybe one of these days we'll have to read a Dylan Thomas poem.
So what is the greatness of Eliot then? If not for you, then for others?
Well, I mean, for me, it's the phrasing, some of the phrasing, the allusiveness, the erudition, even the ostentation of erudition, the craftsmanship. I admire that. The willingness to take chances, to do something new, to expose oneself to ridicule and even contempt. All of that is
And it seems
to
like
the
his
good.
role as a critic was really crucial as well, right? Even though I'm not super familiar with his important essays, but
Well, we've got a
I just saw that
we've got a
some of them are
slide.
really central.
We've got a slide about that. I mean, his influence was enormous on especially those what were they called, the new critics and the reader response critics, Northrop Frye and those people. Very staid and conservative, so not not my tribe necessarily, but certainly he was influential. All right, so
Are we at all concerned about the fact that we're at 2 hours and 25
well,
minutes?
apparently not, man. Let's just go for 5 hours. Let's just get through them.
I don't know.
Here's the mermaid and the scuttling claws.
This is calming after all your corruption. I just need to get back to Disney.
Mm-hmm.
It's a palate cleanser.
Yeah.
So, but we are underwater again.
This was out of order. You should have put this earlier, right?
No, it's not, because here we've got the mermaid singing.
Oh, but
and that's the point.
Oh, okay. But well, then something's out of order. It's this. This should go before that. I grow old. I shall wear the bottoms of my trousers rolled.
Did you do this one?
Yeah, I think I should have.
Okay, so that's why
I should have put it before the.
Yeah, no worries.
The crabs, but I thought this slide. I mean, the mermaid and crab. I thought this was in reference to the scuttling claws. So chronologically, I thought the bottoms of my trousers rolled belonged here. But anyway, not that important. Is this a thing that old men do? They roll up their trousers as they walk along the beach?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. I just see it as something that's like, yeah, that's not fashionable. That's how I read this. Something, like something that just old people do that's kind of cringe. I don't know, like wearing socks with sandals or something.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the beach, we're still in that aquatic
and the flannel
domain, right?
Yeah, and we're in England in a way.
Mm-hmm.
For the English seaside.
Okay.
Okay, let's get to the mermaids and the seagirls, and let's wrap this up because I'm fatigued.
Oh, really? I was just getting my second. It's
my turn to get.
I was just getting my second win.
It's my turn to get ornery.
Get ornery. Okay.
So
Christy's gonna clown on you now.
Exactly. I've heard the mermaid singing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you take these to be the sirens?
Yeah, could be. Luring him to his death, right? Especially when we consider the last line.
Well, or it's just been the constant promise of beautiful women, because it's like that he hears, but he's not included, right? I do not think that they will sing to me.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I just see that as more of like the sexual frustration.
That's such a defeatist attitude, man. Like, why don't you sing to them? if you want them to sing to you, you know?
Yeah,
I
agree.
want to shake this motherfucker. Stop being such a bitch.
He just needs some more confidence, bro. Okay, so and now we can go to the Disney image, which is just we see the contrast between
This one?
No.
All right, back to this.
Back to this. Well, just now we see the mermaid. Ariel's not quite the siren, but we've got the contrast with the crab and the princess, or the mermaid. Sorry, mermaid and the crab. We can continue. We can go to the next slide as well.
Look at her blowing on that conch shell.
Yeah.
All right.
Hashtag Lord of the Flies.
Yeah, well, that's what I was thinking of.
So it seems like there's a distinction here being made between these assertive and seductive sirens, and then this is like a relegated level of female, just the sea girl. There's like the remnants or the flotsam.
What about the jetsam?
So we have lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown. This is like quite a challenging last stanza. So, till humans' voices wake us and we drown. So I don't know. Are the sea girls the same thing as the mermaids,
or are they
different?
surfer girls? Suddenly we've changed scene to California. I've seen them riding seaward on the waves.
This is like is red and brown supposed to be like a more soiled type of woman than like the white hair potentially of the mermaids? It seems like they're like a more degraded. Maybe they're the ones at the cheap hotels.
Okay, possibly. And he drowns in a venereal disease.
Till human voices, the sailor, the life of the sailor. Till human voices, what do you make of the last line?
Well, they're not like mermaid creatures, they're actually human. So the mermaid is like a fantasy and an illusion, and then he's awakened by the all too human voices, and then he drowns.
Yeah, but when he's lingering in the chambers of the sea, is he dreaming when he's by sea girls?
Yeah, possibly. Or fantasizing. I'm thinking of...
Are the sea girls still positive for you or no?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, anything with the word girl in it, fuck it. So, no, but I hear you though. I hear you.
Well,
I like seaweed.
Well, as we're discussing this, I'm thinking of the Roxy Music album Siren. It's called Siren, but on the cover it's Jerry Hall as a mermaid, and she's like, you can Google that image. I should have put this in there. I'll put it in the show notes, but it's like an image of her, and she seems to be like to be like strewn with seaweed, right? Like she's
it's a nice image.
So it reminds me of that. Like, is she a mermaid or is she human? You know the story of Jerry Hall? She was Brian Ferry's girlfriend, and then Mick Jagger went to their place to visit. Brian Ferry goes to the restroom or something, and by the time he comes back, Mick Jagger has stolen Jerry Hall. And then, he becomes the the father of her children, and I think they were legally married. But yeah, old Mick, Sir Mick, he took Jerry Hall away from poor romantic Brian Ferry. This, by the way, is the best Roxy Music album, in my opinion. Siren. Amazing.
Looks interesting.
Amazing. So, is he alluding to Eliot in his English way? That, Roxy Music is kind of art rock and literary and pretentious. I mean, in a good way. I love their stuff, but
sure.
I wonder if he had that in mind. But you asked the question: are these sirens, right? And so that image is pretty on point, isn't it? Because she looks like a mermaid washed up on a beach, but the album is called Siren, so it's a nice intertextual connection.
Yeah.
All right, man.
I'm just sitting. Oh. Hold on. Let's just sit with this. Let's linger in the chamber of the sea just for one more second.
Let's malinger.
Let's linger.
Do you have to let it linger?
We've lingered in the chambers of the sea. I thought about that too. We've lingered in the chambers of the sea by sea girls wreathed with seaweed red and brown.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're underwater, so again, you've got the reference back to the opening epigraph. Like if this whole story's been told posthumously or right in some fantasy safe space, we've been lingering till human voices wake us.
Yeah.
And
we drown.
Again, is that maybe like
the drowning is like
the space of
the drowning is like the returning to the infernal region. It's like going back to hell or staying in hell.
Right. So what? So the lingering has been maybe the telling of his story.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. Mm-hmm. Let's carry on.
Yeah. Okay.
So just to wrap things up, I thought this was interesting. I've always liked this comment by Harold Bloom. He says, I couldn't get along with the people at Yale, which is where he was. They all believed that T.S. Eliot was Christ's vicar on earth. That is such a great phrase. Every time you wrote something or said something, you were supposed to genuflect to the sacred Eliot. Now, the sacred Eliot, in his own hallucinatory way, is not the world's worst poet, but he's an awful literary critic and one of the most vicious anti-Semites of all time. And we're talking real anti-Semite, not, like what it...
Not Free Palestine anti-Semite.
Not what it means today, like anti-Zionist. Like there are examples of anti-Semitism in Eliot's work and certainly in his friend Pound's work. I mean, Pound during World War II was like broadcasting fascist propaganda in Italy and anti-Semitic diatribes. So
this does feel hyperbolic, though. I mean, to call him one of the most... I mean, I tried to follow up on these claims of anti-Semitism, and like I see hints, but I definitely... It seems like he vocally disavowed it, and there's even things that he like what do you call it when you like take something out like from the record kind of thing, like he revamped something, revised, but anyway, there's a different word. Yeah, like redacted. Anyway, the point is to call him one of the most vicious.
Yeah,
why would you?
That seems overstated.
That's a bit extreme.
But there was a poet named Emanuel Litvinov that wrote a poem called To T.S. Eliot, which he read in Eliot's presence at some, poetry reading, an official literary function in London, I guess. And he says that Mr. Litvinov is Jewish, and he was influenced by Eliot, but he always felt that kind of anti-Semitic
animosity
vibe. Yeah, he says, "I am not one accepted in your parish." He's Christ's vicar on earth, so I'm not one accepted in your parish. Blystein is my relative, and I share the protozoic slime of Shylock. It's a really, I've always liked this retort to T.S. Eliot, because the first line of it, not included in this slide, is "Immanence becomes you." I just like how he punctured his reputation. Yeah, just like, oh yes, you're so canonical, and you're the Nobel laureate, and you're so respectable. But here's what I think of you.
I agree with you in that sense. Yeah.
So speaking of anti-Semites, we should probably briefly talk about Ezra Pound, Il Miglior Fabbro, the greater craftsman or artist, as Eliot referred to him. He dedicated the wasteland to him and described him as the greater craftsman, artisan, artist, poet, So it was actually Pound that encouraged Harriet Monroe to publish Eliot in Poetry Magazine. So Pound, if we're talking about modernism, his role cannot be overstated. He was a big supporter of Joyce, also a supporter of Eliot. So, for what it's worth, there wouldn't have been, like, Eliot's career certainly wouldn't have been what it was without the help and assistance and hype of Eliot, of Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound was Eliot's hype man in a way.
Right.
So
his Vince Vaughn. Coming back to the Jon Favreau swingers
his
scene.
Flava Flav, I was gonna say, but okay. Yeah,
but Chuck D is way too much of a man.
So are you? I mean, yeah, not a good analogy with Eliot. Are you familiar with Pound? There's actually a Pound poem from the Cantos that I thought we could do for texting. Really short. Shouldn't take 2 hours. But I mean, do you like Pound? Are you familiar with him?
I'm familiar with, like, To the Subway. Is that what it's called? To the Metro.
Yes, right.
I've probably read a few, but definitely no expert.
Okay. All right. And then let's just briefly talk about his relationship to the aforementioned Viv. This is the first wife with whom he experienced this frustration. As I mentioned in my Substack post, go to markwillwright.substack.com to read my post. It's called Eliot and the Tall Girl in Love. But there's mention of how he marries this socialite, Vivian Eliot, and her name is spelled sometimes like this and sometimes with 2 N's and 2 E's.
And Vivian Haywood Eliot, we should say.
Right, true.
Born Vivian Hay.
Right. But, she cuckolded old possum with Bertrand Russell. And apparently Eliot knew about it and kind of...
Is that confirmed?
Oh, I think so, yeah. Yeah.
I don't... not from what I read.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I heard it was just a rumor.
No, I think... And it was, like, encouraged by Eliot because he didn't have to deal with it. Okay, you service her, Birdie. Which Russell he was pretty randy, so he was happy to do it. Apparently, that some people think that the breakdown of her relationship with him is what made her really, lose it. So I really like Bertrand Russell in many ways, but in his personal life, he wasn't always that honorable, it seems. But who am I to judge?
He kind of looks a little bit like Alfie in this picture. I'm sure he wasn't half as attractive.
Who, Eliot?
Yeah, but I mean, is that the guy's name, Alfie?
Like Jude Law?
Yeah.
Well, the original Alfie was Michael Caine, but yeah, he looks more like the Jude Law version. But no, he's not Jude Law.
No, but who's the lover? Who's Oscar Wilde's lover?
Oh, Bosie.
Bosie, sorry. Looks a tiny bit like
Alfie,
Bosie there.
Okay.
But isn't that also Jude Law?
Yeah, actually it is. Yes, you're right. Interesting, because maybe that's what the confusion was, because Jude Law also plays Alfie in like the remake. All right, man, we're all over the place. The point is, Virginia Woolf said, and again, this is mentioned in my Substack post, if you want more background on Eliot. Virginia Woolf said of Vivian Haywood Eliot, "This bag of ferrets is what Tom wears round his neck." Oh, man, that is harsh. A bag of ferrets. Who is she talking about? My first wife? My first wife? Not only Eliot's? All right. Maybe that's why I like that so much. Oh, you modified this. So here's some pics of Tom and Viv. There's a 1994 movie with Willem Dafoe and Miranda Richardson, which you watched and I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
If you send me a link, I'll watch it later, probably. Or maybe I won't.
Sure,
is it worth watching?
Yeah, just... I don't know. I think for you, I'd like to say yes, because, for example, Bertrand Russell plays a prominent role, and I think you'd enjoy it. Virginia Woolf appears. There's a scene where Viv kind of goes crazy and like almost knifes Virginia Woolf. So you might enjoy seeing some of these, some of these scenes and
the Bloomsbury
relationships
set
that you've been describing. Yeah, they're referenced and criticized by Viv in particular.
Right, well, probably with good reason.
It definitely... Yeah, I mean, some critics objected to the film's portrayal of T.S. Eliot, like suggesting that he wasn't sympathetic enough to her condition. So I think this was like the main question that emerged for me from the film is like, and of course it's impossible to judge really without, I mean, the only way I could even get close to a realm of judgment, which I know judgment's not even cool anyway, but let's just say would be to go and read a lot more of like the source letters, diaries, and so on, but basically the question you have is like that I was left with is like, how justified were they in committing her? Because it was against her will.
Yeah.
She was still functioning. I mean, it's not like, I mean, the film really shows it as it's very brutal. I mean, like
I imagine
like they brought in like a team of doctors, and like she was still totally coherent. She could still talk. And so then and it's almost like they took her away because
to shut her up.
People thought that she was threatening his reputation. Like his ability to be this like great poet.
I've always suspected that there's probably some very sordid business associated with that,
But on the other hand, as I said, you could equally make the argument that he was quite patient in terms of sticking with her, and that he was quite discreet.
Right.
So that's also, that reading is also available and defended to some extent by the film. He doesn't
divorce her. He
he's stuck with it for a long time, and despite her like being fucking out of her mind.
So that, right. And as you put it that way, I'm more sympathetic because I'm thinking of my own experience.
It's hard. That's why I'm saying it's hard to say. It's hard to say if we're not there.
Yes, true.
And ultimately, it's on her. Like, she did freak out when he separated her. You know, like she couldn't accept it, and like all
right, man.
But he never visited her.
She deserved it. I'm convinced.
He never visited her. And it sounds like she kind of like remained emotionally loyal to him forever.
Yeah. I mean, I read that she would like come looking for him at the office. What, Faber and Faber, was he working there? He worked at a bank too, but he would like leave out the back door to avoid her, and she saw him at a public reading. He was doing a reading, and she showed up in her fascist uniform with the
this is right, and with her dog,
puppy,
with the dog,
and tried to talk to him, and he's like, no, I can't.
Yeah, so it's obviously like a major part of his narrative, his life narrative.
I should watch it,
and she could write in her own right, you know.
Yeah,
so
I should watch it.
Shouldn't dismiss that either. Yeah, I've talked you into it.
Yeah,
I just wish I could find a better HD quality, because like, I found like I downloaded it and I watched it on the web, and both were the same quality. So like I didn't improve it by downloading.
I realized what the still you sent me was. I, Thomas, renounced the devil and all his works, with for some reason Spanish subtitles.
Yeah, in the end I ended up watching. My Spanish is like decent. And in the end, I preferred the version with the Spanish subtitles, because like some of the dialogue was a bit hard for me to catch. So like coupled with the Spanish subtitles, like I was able to make the most of it.
All right. So that must have been his Anglican conversion. It's so interesting. Like, what was he an Episcopalian in the States before he converted to the Anglican Church? I mean, this too, that's a rhetorical question, but this too is an example of his conservatism, you know. Like, someone asked him to describe himself. He said, I'm a classicist in literature, a royalist in politics, and an Anglican in religion.
I saw that.
It's like, well, congratulations to you fucking Tory. You know? I mean...
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So let's wrap this up. Man, this is longer than the OJ episode. Shame on us. This is yours. What is modernity? Tell us.
I don't know, bro. Let's leave it. This is such a surface description.
No, come on. I don't really care. Secularization, belief in progress.
No, let's go to the. You can go to the next. Let's go to the next slide then. I'm sorry, but. And I feel like we've already done it. We've done it.
Cities, severed connection to nature. All right, bullet points, people. Bullet points.
We've already talked about all this stuff. Is the point?
You're getting ornery.
Exactly.
All right, that's fine.
Because like this is not the text that I love, you know. Like I could do 3 hours if we're talking about like Michael Jackson.
Okay.
But I can't do 3 hours on this.
Okay.
So anyway, and also I just feel out of my element. I think that's a big part of it. Like
You're not, man. You're in your element.
But I'm saying like I don't really know T.S. Eliot that well, you know, or at all.
But you know him much better now after engaging.
It's true.
So that's the whole point of texting.
I just realized that's the whole point of texting. Misspelled here.
We don't.
It's true.
We don't shame people for their lack of knowledge. We only shame people that refuse to engage with the text. But you have certainly engaged more than me.
I've tried.
You did very well. All right, so you
Thanks,
got a
Dad.
slide with says your face when analyzing Eliot's modernism elements in Love Song, and it is a.
Which analyzing is spelled wrong. I didn't notice that before.
Oh my God, it is. That's what happens when you.
Oh, can I just tell you something really funny? Like, this is just, I was watching some random video today on T.S. Eliot,
Mhm.
and in the first like slide, they spelled marvelous wrong, and they was like, I don't remember what they were talking about, but so my comment, I just like spelled it correctly in the comments.
Yeah.
And then the creator of the video like hearted my comment and said, "Thank you so much." It's just funny because they like took it as me saying the video was marvelous.
Oh,
Anyway,
right.
nothing. You know what's interesting? This is no racial, but when I was like researching and I was just looking at results, search results for T.S. Eliot, I would say 60% are from like Indian YouTube channels.
Mhm.
And it's just interesting, like, you know, India is probably India could have more English majors maybe than anywhere else. And so it's like interesting this a figure like T.S. Eliot is like being, you know, has massive influence on like the Indian academic world. And it's just interesting for me. I mean, I'd like to think about that more, kind of how, like, why that is, whether that's fair, like whether Indians resent it or do they like, I mean, what is that like, you know, just that the whole relationship between like, yeah, between Western literature and like India is like, and the yeah, so it's just interesting how many videos, and they're speaking English with the strong Indian accent, so it's like a little bit off-putting for me when I want to watch the videos because I'm just like, it's not necessarily that clear. Have you seen those kind of like videos before?
Not like what you're talking about. Not produced by an Indian scholar.
Okay, yeah, it's just interesting. Okay,
But I can imagine.
but
I can imagine. I've seen like Indian produced tech videos, like how to fucking
yeah, they do tech
turn
videos for
on
sure.
your HP laptop, which is an issue I sometimes
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
So this is a slide featuring who?
I don't know.
I think it's Dr. Johnson looking
Okay.
carefully at some text. He's texting. He's a textual deviant. Dr. Samuel Johnson.
Thank you.
All right. So
okay, let's continue.
Yeah,
let's continue.
Yeah, we're continuing, man. This is your slide. This is from British poet Gilbert Adair. So tell us about it.
That's
Why
right.
do we have this?
This is a friend of my dad's. I believe they both studied at Cambridge together. Mr. Adair went on to get his PhD in English literature, and I think he lives in Hawaii now, and is a poet.
Okay.
So my dad sent him your recent post about Eliot, and my dad asked him to share his thoughts on Prufrock.
Mm-hmm.
So his response was that I think Prufrock is an important early poem, depressing enough in the social scene it depicts, but also moving with a highly atmospheric opening. Yeah, I like that. I did teach it for at least 3 years at the National Uni of Singapore to freshman English students. The tall girl stuff is fun, invented, and doggerel by comparison. What does doggerel mean?
It's just like cheap verse, you know, like trash, basically. Throwaway verse.
That's what I thought, but it's next to fun and inventive. It's like, so you'd agree with that?
He says doggerel by comparison. Like, it's not the high art of the Nobel laureate Eliot. I think it's perfectly fair.
Right, but I'm just saying, like, the fun and inventive are like positive. So I was wondering if the doggerel like undercuts that.
No, he just says by comparison. It's like not his best work. Like, if that's all he ever wrote, he would not be revered as he is. It makes perfect sense to me. I like what he said.
Okay. Should I continue? Okay. What I value in Eliot, personally speaking, is not so much his worldview, still less his politics,
Right.
but his sense of the auditory imagination, a feeling for syllable and rhythm that goes far below the conscious levels of thought and feeling to invigorate every word. It's what, he argues, enables you to get a poem even before you understand it in a lot of detail. The opening pages of The Wasteland are exemplary in this regard. But I would recommend Tom and Mark to try reading Prufrock aloud to each other, to hear the auditory imagination come in action
Which
there.
we did.
Besides syllable and rhythm, they might also listen for interplay of long and short words, rhyme and the frequent liquid flow, often satiric, but also where each word has to be sounded distinctly, especially in the harsh opening image, and where he can be effectively simple. I do not think that they will call to me is quite heartbreaking. Best, Gilbert. So thank you, Gilbert.
Yes.
If you got to 2 hours and 59 minutes, which will be a master feat in its own right. Maybe we can do a timestamp for that.
Yeah, very nice reaction.
And from Gilbert to Herman.
Yes. Actually, this is GJV, but yeah, I know him as Herman as well. So I just asked for his immediate reaction. He has taught this poem many times, I'm sure, read it many times. And so he says it's obviously iconic, with Prufrock conceived as a parodic modern, the antithesis of classical heroes. Parodic modern hero, I meant. A nondescript and absurd shuffling around every man, anxious and ridiculous, longing for mythical mermaids. Poor fellow, etherized by modernity. So, yeah,
I love it.
we touched upon a lot of that. So, yeah. Thanks to everyone that contributed to this marathon episode. I always think we're going to keep it to 1 hour, and here we are bumping up on 3. Ridiculous. But the next text, by request, will be that UN speech of Gaddafi's. I want to say it's from 2009, but anyway, you know the one I mean, the one that recently resurfaced.
I don't.
Well, it recently started trending, just like that Osama bin Laden speech, you know.
Fucking TikTok, man. It's
bullshit. Yeah. Should be banned.
It should be banned.
Of course. But
will be soon enough.
But so it's that speech in which he critiques American foreign policy and, you know, Western imperialism, neocolonialism, whatever. We'll get more into that next week. I know some of you are waiting for that, and we'll try to keep it to an hour, but we probably won't succeed. Once again, subscribe to the Substack newsletters. Mark Will Write, WRITE.substack.com, TomekB.substack.com, although he says he's not really publishing much over there these days, but whatever. Sign up. Doesn't cost you anything. Just send him your email. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Mark Will Write, WRITE. Any final thoughts? J. Alfred?
Welcome to Prufrock. That's my final thought.
All right. On that note, we say farewell. Until next time.
Kendrick won.